Hello everyone, this is Michael Wolf from United Wolves Productions, and welcome to the first episode of our new series, Behind the Lens. Throughout this series, we'll give the spotlight to pretty much every part of a production, from the writing process, the planning process, storyboarding and directing, costume and props where relevant, and then throughout the shoot day itself. We'll talk about a typical shoot day for each and every one of our projects, the number of people we used on set, the type of gear that we use, the lighting, the framing, the problem solving on the day, the editing process, and finally we will evaluate the finished product to see what we liked, what worked, what didn't work, and what we can improve for next time. This is a series dedicated to our own process of filmmaking for each and every one of our projects. It is for people who just might want to take a look behind the lens and see how we work. It might be for new and upcoming filmmakers who might want some advice from people who have done it before. And it might be just for us to have an opportunity to look back at our own work, evaluate what worked and what didn't work, and see how we can improve for our next time. It is only fitting to begin this series with having a look at our first English language project to be released, namely the comedy web series Roommates. We filmed the first 11 episodes of Roommates in the span of 5 days in the beginning of July 2022. It was a very hard and intense and laborious process, but we managed to make it to the end and hopefully created a good enough product for you to enjoy. This first episode of Behind the Lens will be an introductory episode towards the whole process of Roommates. I'll talk a little bit more in depth about the writing, about some of the costume and prop choices, what our typical shoot day was, the number of team that we had, and what gear we used to shoot it. And then afterwards, in the next episode, we'll delve into the specifics of episode 1. Now, of course, we cannot film anything if we don't have a script, and we don't have a script if we don't have a writer. We have a brilliant writer working with us called Dylan Cullen. He has his own YouTube channel, you could see it here, by the name of BobLobV2. Dylan wrote the first 11 episodes of Roommates, loosely in his own words, basing the characters on us, taking a few small characteristics and then extrapolating them into the land of ridiculousness. Now, during the introductory video, I'll only briefly talk about a few things about the writing style of Roommates, but Dylan himself will talk about each and every episode and the writing choices he made within it. Roommates as a style is a sitcom, a very short sitcom, but a sitcom nonetheless. That is reflective in the humor of the series. You will see things that for everyday people are a very small nuisance, whereas for the roommates are a groundbreaking discovery or a problem. Then again, there are things that would alter our own perception of reality that for the roommates are just an everyday thing. But you'll discover more of that as the episodes progress. Another thing to mention about writing is that in good writing, every scene of a larger project needs to expand on characters, plot, or the law, the rules of the reality that we have created. Of course, with the little short episodes that we are focusing primarily on one of these things, though Dylan, the good writer that he is, manages to further usually at least 2 forward, if not all 3. Next, we should talk a little bit about the storyboarding and directing side of things. Of course, when we have the script, we have a good enough idea of what we want the feeling of the scene to be. If it furthers characters, then we know what to focus on in these characters. If it furthers the plot, then we need to look at the specific feel of the edit that we want. If it furthers the lore, then we need to make sure that we've spent enough attention on that. As such, it is incredibly important to have a storyboard and a shot list. Of course, a lot of the times you don't know the location intimately before you've been there, so storyboarding would be best done on location if you are a small budget company. If you can build your own set, you can do all the storyboards prior to that, and then have the set built around your own ideas. Another thing to take into consideration is the framing of the shots. There are many to choose from. You have a wide shot, a mid shot, a medium close-up, also known as an MCU, a big close-up, also known as a BCU, an over-the-shoulder, also known as an OTS, a 2-shot, a 3-shot, a moving shot, a pan, a tilt. There's a lot of things to do with the camera. They don't only speak about the frame itself, but also what the frame tells you. For example, there's a big debate between static shots, whether to use static shots or moving shots. Moving shots are primarily used to enhance emotion. Motion creates emotion. Static shots just show you the space. Moving shots, in which the camera moves around the space, or what I call them fancy shots, are easier to create a point of view for the audience, seeing specific things in the location you want to show them, to enhance the story. It's also good to think about a logical progression of shots. Unless deliberate, it is always better for the shots to match. So that, for example, you don't have the editing process where you cut from a big close-up of one character to a very wide shot of the other character, because it would feel very disjointed. The last thing to mention here, especially if you are a beginning filmmaker, is that you might want to think about shooting for the edit. It's a specific process known that you only do coverage of a certain shot that you know you're going to use. So if you use enough time in pre-production on storyboards and shot lists, then you would have a pretty good idea that, for example, you only need over-the-shoulder shots for a specific segmentation of the script, instead of filming the entire scene for over-the-shoulder. That saves time, it saves money, and it means that your vision will be preserved in the editing process. A big downfall of that, however, is that if you're not used to doing that, or if you haven't done enough coverage, then you might go to the editing suite and find out that you don't have enough to even cut the scene together. So please be careful about that. The next thing to mention are the costumes and props. Now, every project will have a different set of costumes and props, and you might want to do different decisions for them. In our production, you will see a lot of the props actually being meaningful to the characters that they use them. In the first episode, that will be the banana for Angelina, the spices for Jeremy, and the headphones for Harry. In later episodes, you will see those same little nods to the character in the books in episode 3, the cards and coin in episode 8, the broom in episode 7, the clock in episode 9, and the milk in episode 11. Regarding costumes, because of the style of the series, the main conflict usually is between Jeremy and Angelina, my character and Zori's character. So we wanted to showcase in some of their pieces of clothing that, although they're on opposing sides, they approach every argument in the same way, head on, without any willingness to compromise. So you'll see in most episodes, we have tried to have a little piece of clothing on Jeremy and a little piece of clothing on Angelina that are in the same color palette, showing their similarities even in their conflict. Whereas Harry, being the proverbial child of two abusive parents, he always wears something different. He's always in the entirely wrong color palette because he's always outside of that conflict. The only place that is excluded of that rule is the intro itself, where all of us wear an item of purple color to showcase the unity between the roommates that never actually comes to pass, at least not within the first 11 episodes. Next, we should mention the type of equipment that you use. Everything we've shot so far has been shot on a Sony a7S II cinema camera. The lenses that we have and that we use are a 24-70mm G Master zoom lens with a 2.8 f-stop, a Zeiss 50mm prime lens with 1.4 f-stop, a Samyang 35mm prime lens with a 1.4 f-stop, and a Sony wide zoom lens 10-18mm with an f-stop of 4.0. The camera usually sits very comfortably on a newer heavy-duty tripod with fluid head, or sometimes it is on the DJI Ronin SC, and recently we upgraded to the S2 model. In terms of lighting, we use the newer LED panels, the newer RGB LED panels, because they come with an attachment that makes every one of them like a little softbox lighting. For our key light, we usually use the Godox VL150. That's plus the dome and the honeycomb for it, for the diffusion of light. We usually use 2 C-stands and sandbags for them. In terms of sound, we use the Zoom H6 recorder, connected to which is the Rode shotgun mic, usually covered by the Rode Blimp. When on location, of course, that is fitted onto a carbon fiber boom pole. Then, of course, there are other small trifles like a clapperboard, like a white balance sheet, and what makes a lot of our shots so cinematic is a smoke machine. Links to all of our equipment will be down below in the description if you'd like to have a look at them. The last thing I want to mention in this section is locations. We like to pick a unique and different location for every one of our shoots, but in the case of roommates, they all live in the same location, so we booked an Airbnb for an extended period of time in which we shot it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend using Airbnbs for such shoots because whilst not strictly illegal, you can shoot in Airbnbs without the host knowing, but it's always slightly more immoral. We try to negotiate with the hosts of Airbnbs as much as possible regarding these sort of shoots. So in our case, for roommates, we needed something with definitively 3 bedrooms for each one of the 3 roommates. We needed a toilet, which every place has, of course, a large enough living room to accommodate us, and a large enough kitchen, because a lot of the arguments were happening in the living room and the kitchen. And the place that we found was actually spectacularly useful for this. Next up on the list is a typical day of shooting for us. So normally we'd wake up in the same house as we stayed there. We would eat breakfast and then run the lines and start shooting. All of the storyboards were done on previous days, so we have enough of a time frame to create a shot list for them. Because we shoot everything on a single camera, that means that we have more freedom in terms of lighting, which isn't as prevalent in roommates as some of our other projects. But it also means that it takes longer time, because we have to, whilst moving the camera to the next person, we then have to move all of the lighting around as well. A lot of preparation was key for that. The shooting process was very similar from scene to scene, with the only small differences of the joke structure and the acting versus directing side of things. For the joke structure, every time we'd look at the script, we'll find funny moments or things that we want to do funny things with. We'll discuss as a group what might be funnier than others, and then sometimes even shoot a few different types of jokes, or the same joke in a few different ways, so that in post-production we had the freedom to choose what we thought was objectively funnier. That is not to say that every joke landed, or that every joke was the funniest, or that every choice we made of a type of a joke worked best, but it is a learning curve for all of us to know how to approach comedy, as it is quite subjective. The last thing to mention here is the acting versus directing. As I am both an actor and the director of this, I found it somewhat not difficult necessarily, but definitely more stressful to have to think about both my own performance and the performance of all of my colleagues and all the framing and all the shots. It requires a lot of trust to your cinematographer and camera operator, and it also elongates the time of the shooting slightly more, because you don't have the luxury of seeing the shots as they're happening in real time. You have to first be in the shots and then go around, look at them and see if anything needs changing. Naturally, there was a lot of problem solving during the shoot days, primarily with where to hide lights, be that on a C-stand in the ceiling or hidden under the table, just enough to light everyone's faces. Now, as it is a comedy, there isn't a lot of dramatic lighting. In comedy, everything needs to be lit, everything needs to look more colorful, more beautiful, and even slightly flat when it comes to lights. But as I would speak more about this in later episodes, please, as a rule of thumb, never use ceiling lights. There is a reason for that. Of course, they might be seen in some of the wider shots, but they're only there as practical lights. You could see the two lights behind me are not at all the lights that are actually lighting me. And it is very important to distinguish between that. It's always good to only use either practical lights to convey that there is light and lights that are bought specifically for filming. Another big thing to mention, which was a problem-solving issue in every shoot that anyone has ever done, and that is continuity problems. That could mean continuity of movement. So if you've drunk tea between two lines in this take, you have to drink the same tea in the same way between the same two lines in the next take. But that could also mean consistency of acting. So if you are shooting me whilst I'm talking to my acting partner and they're delivering the lines in a certain way, I'll react to them in a certain way. So if you turn the camera around and they suddenly change their performance, that means that in post-production, both performances will not match. So that is another thing to just keep in mind whilst starting your filmmaking career. The final part of this introductory video, as it were, will be to focus a little bit on the editing process as well. There is, of course, a lot of courses on editing, and there's a lot of editors out there who are happy to teach, but I could talk about our own process of editing. It follows usually the same set of steps. We record the video files through the camera on an SD card. We record the audio files through the Zoom H6 on an SD card. Then we'll go to our workstation, transfer all the files, and then comes the two most uneventful parts of editing. First, every audio file and every video file that correspond together should have the same name. So first we rename all the audio files and the video files so that for every video file there's an audio file. After which we put them in your chosen editing software. We personally use Sony Vegas, but you're more than welcome to use Premiere Pro or Adobe After Effects or DaVinci, whichever works best for you, of course. And the second part of the uneventful part of editing is the synchronizing. That is what the clapperboard is used for. Or in the absence of a clapperboard, you could just clap. So that in the editing software, you can very easily synchronize the clapping graphs on both the video and the audio file. And you know that this way the sound is synced to the video. After which comes the part where the editor works the closest with the director, the cutting process, or the telling a story through edit process. Then the director and the editor will sit together in the editing suite and decide on what are the best options for cutting, what are the best options for pacing, and what are the best options for the project as a whole. After the edit has been agreed upon, comes the sound design of it, so that all the sound effects or necessary Foley sound that you have created on the day is input in the program. And finally comes the color correction. You could either do that in the chosen editing software, or as we found, the best way for the coloring type of things is the DaVinci Resolve. It is free as its basic version, and you're more than welcome to use it to color all of your projects. After the edit has been color corrected, it is then rendered at the highest quality possible, and it is ready for use. In terms of overall time that we need for these kind of projects, if it was a dramatic piece that heavily depends on the story to be told, it usually takes us about 6 hours for every 3 to 4 minute video from the beginning of the editing process to the final product. To end this introductory episode of Behind the Lens, I thought it would be fitting to have a look at how we decided to film the intro for Roommates. Naturally, we did the stupid thing of putting a lot of time and effort into this shot, and then decided to use the trailer as an intro from episode 2 onwards. But regardless, it will give you an idea of how we decide to do things. I already mentioned about the costumes earlier on, that they are all fitting with each other. We're all wearing some form of purple to show our unity as roommates. But other than that, I can now talk about the actual production of it. We knew we wanted to introduce all the characters with what they would be known for slightly. My character is the usual cook of the house, so we thought it would be fitting to begin with him making some form of food, be as simple as a piece of toast. Dan's character likes to eat pieces of toast, so he promptly takes that and goes to do his homework, because one of his characteristics is that he is a university student. Zori's character only cares about things that are already there and waiting for her. So she just picks up the ball with the Doritos inside it and goes on to start watching a film. In terms of shots, we knew that we wanted it to be an unbroken shot from beginning to end, showing different parts of the characters and introducing each and every one of them. And we also knew that we want to end it on a couch. I don't know what it is about couches and sitcoms, but they tend to go very well together. Pretty much all of the most famous sitcoms end their intro on a couch, like Friends, The Simpsons, The Big Bang Theory. Even the show that we loosely based our single camera shooting on, Malcolm in the Middle. So without further ado, let's take a look at how we built this shot. We decided to start on the toaster, as me creating food and introducing my character. Dan's character takes the toast promptly, and we turn to his writing the homework. We then see Zori's character just taking whatever's already ready and going towards the living room. Now I'm going to stop right here. Actually, I'm going to go back slightly. In this particular shot, there is a light hidden right there next to the bathroom. Another light on the top of the stairs to light the kitchen space more. All of the three lights, although on, mainly use as practical lights. They don't light us at all. There's one light up there on a C-stand, but you won't be able to see that. As we move into the living room, there are two soft boxes on the place of the TV, lighting the entire couch. Of course, that makes everything slightly flatter, but in comedy, that is way more allowed than in dramatic lighting and scenes. Go back a little bit. We wanted both characters, both Zori's character and my character, to end up on the couch and have a small idea of a squabble. We don't really argue about anything, but we all want what the other person has until Harry comes and essentially breaks our fighting apart, which is usually what happens in a lot of these episodes. We tend to fight until Harry breaks the tension between us. Finally, he sits on the couch. We decide not to be interested in what he's watching just for the beginning of it though, and then suddenly, promptly become interested in everything, having a shared Doritos to show the unity of these roommates, a unity that you won't be able to see for a very, very long time. And that's about it for this intro. In the next episode, we shall talk about the first episode of Roommates, the challenges that we faced, the choices that we made, and what we could improve if we could do it again. With this, we can finish the first episode of Behind the Lens. If you think I have missed anything, or if you'd like to know anything more about our equipment or our process of working, please let me know in the comments below and I'll include it in any next installments. If you haven't already, please give a watch to the first episode of Roommates that we have on our channel to be prepared for the next episode of this series. From today, we officially also have a Patreon page. So if you like the content we are creating and would like to support any further creation, please consider donating. Even the lower tiers help massively for the production of everything we have going on around here. And of course, as always, like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay up with everything United Wolves Productions. And I'll see you next time on Behind the Lens.